If you're anything like me, you've probably ridden in one of these before. Elevator, from the Latin elevare, meaning to raise up. This concept has functionally been employed by humans since at least 4600 BC, where Neolithic people used hoists and pulleys to lift containers of flint out of their mines. Spanning from then to people like Archimedes and his water elevator, or the 28 elevators that helped the Roman Colosseum function. But that's not our focus for today. Those are freight elevators. What I'd like to focus on are the passenger elevators that we're more familiar with, and the less familiar person who popularized them, Elisha Otis. You've probably ridden on an Otis elevator and didn't know it. Moving roughly 2.4 billion people daily, with 2.4 million elevators, there's a good chance that if you walk into any given elevator, it's an Otis. Elisha Otis installed the first commercial passenger elevator that we'd recognize today on March 23, 1857. 168 years ago, people were riding elevators. Abraham Lincoln could have sent a telegraph to a samurai while riding on an elevator. At the same time Harriet Tubman was rescuing enslaved people, shoppers were riding elevators. We had elevators before the Civil War, before we had greenback paper currency. At that time in 1857, the U.S. only had 31 states. Sadly for us, most information regarding Elisha Otis focuses more on the elevator than on the man without whom we may not have elevators. Open the Otis Elevator Company website, and front and center are the profits of the company and the number of units sold. Their About Us page says that they put people at the center of everything they do. Their history page has a brief 2-minute video about Elisha Otis and his 2 sons, followed by a history that they begin in 1853, skipping 42 years of his life. So, I'd like to give a fuller image of Elisha Otis. Our story begins on a farm in the small hamlet of Halifax, Vermont. It's August of 1811, and Elisha Otis has just been born as the youngest of 6 children to Stephen Otis and Phoebe Glynn. Elisha was inquisitive in his youth, leading him to venture away from the dull monotony of farm work and towards the far more intriguing forge, becoming more interested in blacksmithing than farming, tinkering with farm equipment, repairing, and improving. There he grew skillful in woodworking and engineering. By the age of 19, with his father's permission, set out to put his skills into use in the wider world. Elisha moved to Troy, New York in 1830, getting a job suited for an engineering carpenter like himself, working in his brother Chandler's shop, manufacturing wagons, driving wagons, and hauling cargo between Troy, New York and Brattleboro, Vermont. Earning a living and honing his skills wasn't all there was to life. Elisha, now 23, meets another fellow 23-year-old Vermonter, Susan A. Houghton, and together they get married, having their first child, Charles, within the year. No matter how bountiful life may be, nothing prepares you for the harsh hit of reality. In the same year, Elisha catches a terrible case of pneumonia. Remember, this is the pneumonia of 1834. No antibiotics, just rest and lots of hope. Severe cases of pneumonia can leave people with chronic lung damage, recurrent respiratory infections, fatigue, physical frailty, heart strain, and increased sensitivity to your environment. This pneumonia nearly kills him and leaves him with lasting health issues. Over the next 3 years, Elisha struggles, but is successful enough to move his wife and now 3-year-old son to a newly purchased plot of land in the Vermont hills of Brattleboro by the Green River. Along the banks of the Green River, looking to make a better life for his family, Elisha designs and builds his own grist mill for milling grains. But there aren't enough customers, and he isn't earning enough money. Trying again, he converts his grist mill into a sawmill, but that also doesn't attract customers. Sources point to the failures of his businesses being due to chronically poor health. And I don't know if you guys know anyone with chronic health conditions, but they are debilitating, physically and mentally, especially while trying to support a wife and young child. With skills from his youth and early career, Elisha, persistent, tries once again at creating a business, doing something he's familiar with, manufacturing carriages and wagons. For what he's able to do, he does pretty well, continuing this business for a few years, earning enough money, allowing him and his wife Susan to grow their family, having another child, Norton, in 1840. By now, the Otis family was doing well for themselves, raising 2 kids and successfully operating a carriage manufacturing business for about 5 years now. But tragic reality strikes again. His wife, Susan, whom he had been married to for 8 years, had 2 kids with, who had been supportive of him and his businesses despite their failures over the years, and who loved Elisha despite his health issues. Susan dies. She was only 30 years old, leaving a financial and health unstable Elisha Otis with an 8-year-old and 2-year-old kid to take care of. Within 3 years, looking to move away from the past, away from Vermont, Elisha moves back to New York and settles his family in Albany, marrying another Vermonter from his hometown of his same age of 34, a woman named Elizabeth Boyd. With a new life and a new wife, a new job was needed. Elisha's past carpentry, engineering, and intuitive thought gained him employment as a master mechanic at O'Tingley & Company, a bedstead manufacturer. During this time, Elisha oversaw the installation of all machinery in the new factory, and while working there, Elisha, as inventive as ever, designs a railway safety brake that could be controlled by the engineer. He invents a new way to fix rails on 4-poster beds, and improves the operation of turbine wheels. He also invents an automatic woodworking machine that increases the speed of bed frame production by a factor of 4. All were labor-saving inventions that he went financially unacclaimed for. By 1851, Elisha was in Bergen, New Jersey, again working as a master mechanic in a bedstead factory. The firm sent him to Yonkers, New York, where he was employed to organize and install machinery for Mays and Burns Company, who were converting an abandoned sawmill into a bedstead factory. In order to lift large loads of heavy machinery to the upper floors, hoists and pulleys were needed. Although elevators, using hoists and pulleys, had been around for millennia, people were wary to use them due to their safety concerns. If the rope snapped, then the tonnage of machinery and/or workers would come violently crashing down. A life of sickness, inability to physically do labor, skills as a carpenter, engineer, master mechanic, years of building and operating wagons and carriages, a life of invention, sparked Elisha's next big idea. The safety device consisted of a used spring-leaf wagon brake attached to the top and bottom of the hoist platform and the overhead lifting cable. Under normal circumstances, the spring was kept in place by the pull of the platform's weight on the lifting cable. If the cable broke, then this pressure was immediately released, causing the springs to snap open. This would engage a sawtoothed ratchet bar on both sides of the elevator shaft, causing the lift to stop. Out of necessity for safety, necessity to earn a living, and necessity to invent, Elisha creates the first elevator safety brake. In 1852, he built 2 safety hoisters for his employer, Benjamin Newhouse, and a third for a neighboring company interested in the concept. The next year, Newhouse closes the bedstead operation, and Elisha resigns from his job to start a small elevator shop. In 1853, Elisha sells his first elevator, forever changing history. Up until then, most buildings could only be about 7 stories tall. After that, people got tired from walking up the stairs. The ability to safely carry passengers up allowed for a future of skyscraping cities. Elisha founds the E.G. Otis Company to design and build safety hoists, not just for lifting goods and supplies, but for people too. However, as it's been with Elisha's inventions and business ideas, there were no takers, and by the end of 1853, he had an inventory worth $122.71, including 2 oil cans, a second-hand lathe, and an accounting ledger that recorded his measly earnings. He grew dissatisfied and considered heading out west to try his luck in the California gold rush. Enter P.T. Barnum. You might know him as The Greatest Showman, popularly portrayed by Hugh Jackman in a film by the same name. This being said, Barnum was a showman, creating oddity exhibits such as the Fiji Mermaid, General Tom Thumb, and founding the Ringling and Bros and Barnum and Bailey Circus. It's 1853. The Crystal Palace, a huge building of glass and iron, has just been constructed in New York City for the exhibition of the industry of all nations, the World's Fair. But the fair wasn't attracting much popularity and was losing money. P.T. Barnum was hired to bring more excitement, more visitors, and more revenue. Barnum, fascinated by Elisha's invention and looking for a spectacle, partnered with him for a grand exhibit. Elisha stood on a platform suspended by a single rope and was slowly raised higher and higher into the air, when suddenly the rope was cut. All eyes immediately darted onto Elisha as the platform began to drop, expectedly to come crashing down, destroying the lift and Elisha together. The crowd screamed. The lift halted in place. The crowd, bewildered by the turn of events, were astounded by Elisha's invention and exhilarated by the performance. Elisha removed his hat and with a slight bow said, "All safe, gentlemen, all safe." If I may, this might be the world's first elevator pitch. Elisha got orders for about 36 freight elevators, lifting his business into the spotlight, while the World's Fair closed after having not gained enough attention or profit. March 23, 1857, Elisha installs the first safety elevator for passenger service in the store of E.V. Hawtwort & Co. in New York City, a 5-story department store whose wealthy clients included Mary Todd Lincoln, wife of Abraham Lincoln. Finally, with the success of one idea and a business on the rise, Elisha continues to invent things like a steam plow, rotary bake oven, and with the help of his first son Charles, an oscillating steam engine for elevator use. In January of 1861, he finally secures his family's future by obtaining a patent to protect his invention, the improved hoisting apparatus. With an up that big, also comes a greater down. 4 months later, in April of 1861, plagued by a life of chronic illness, Elisha contracts the bacterial infection, diphtheria, and dies. He was only 49 years old. He'd run his company for 8 years. It was profitable for 7, with industry only really taking off in the last 4 years of his life. The company passed on to Elisha's sons, Charles and Norton, who each had unique lives, with Charles fighting for the Union in the Civil War, and Norton going on to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. Together, they continued Elisha's legacy, installing elevators in the Eiffel Tower in Paris, another in the Washington Monument, and later, the Otis Company even coined the term escalator, a combination of the word scala, Latin for stairs, and elevator. And from there, the rest is history. Without ever being interested in blacksmithing, Elisha may not have gone into carpentry and wagon making. Without health issues necessitating non-physical labor, Elisha may not have been as inventive. Without having worked as a wagon maker and driver, Elisha may not have been familiar with wagon springs and brakes. Without having worked in bedstead factories, Elisha may not have been in New York to recognize the need for elevator safety brakes. Without the 1853 World's Fair failing to raise revenue, P.T. Barnum may not have reached out to Elisha, and his famous stunt would never popularize elevators. Every life is a series of ups and downs, every victory reflected on by defeat, and every defeat driving determination for victory. Elisha Otis's inventive desire struggles with businesses and earning a living, losing a wife, and in chronic illness, made him who he was. Although he didn't invent the elevator, without a turbulent life, we may not have had the elevators that we're familiar with. Today, Halifax, Vermont, Elisha's hometown, remains a quiet town. There's no marker, placard, or memorial there for the man who would go on to uplift millions. It's easy to focus on the end product, the statistics on numbers sold, the physical elevators that still exist. It's much harder to focus on the individuals who made all that possible. It's difficult to focus on every individual who makes everything possible. The modern-day mechanics that repair elevators, the workers on the grounds of the steel mill providing material to create elevators, and knowing that their lives are full of ups and downs, losses and gains, births and deaths. I wish we had a fuller story of Elisha Otis and his life, but information doesn't last that long if it's not recorded or if it's not remembered. We usually only recognize geniuses once they've long since passed. So, before they pass, do like the Otis Company aspires to, and put people at the center of everything you do. I'm Anarchio, and thanks for watching.